Learn how an Alberta-based startup is improving women's reproductive health. Winning with Chairman Randy Duguay and CEO Sarah Harper from My Fertility Labs on today's episode of the Executive Wins Podcast. Welcome to the Executive Wins Podcast, where senior leaders share their biggest wins so you can get inspired and grow your business. Here's your host, Gordon Shepherd. Welcome to the Executive Wins Podcast, where senior leaders share their biggest wins so that you can get inspired and grow your business. I'm your host, Gordon Shepherd. And to kick off the show, I want to tell you about a leadership lesson that I learned from Randy Valk, president of Grassroots Landscaping and Irrigation, who on episode 38 said this: "Be the river, not the reservoir. Be the river, not the reservoir." Now think about what that means for a leader. Like a river, you want to keep things flowing. You don't want to be the reservoir where ideas stop and all the decision-making has to be made. So when you feel alone, like nobody else gets it, or you're asking yourself, why does everybody always have to come to me for answers? I hope that you take a moment to say this out loud. Be the river, not the reservoir. And hopefully that will help you to honestly look at yourself and reflect on the style of leader you are being in that moment. And then you might do what Randy does. Read a business book and actually apply the concepts. Get inspired at a John Maxwell seminar. And of course, you can always listen to all of the wise leaders who have already appeared on this show by checking out our past episodes. I also want to let you know that the Executive Wins Podcast is the winner of the 2025 Best New Podcast Award in the Quill Podcasting Awards. It's a real honor to know that this show has been recognized in its first year of production. Another way the show is being recognized, well, that's by you, because the Executive Wins Podcast has surpassed 24,000 views on YouTube and more than 15,000 minutes of watch time, along with having over 1,000 downloads on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen. Leaders who practice what they preach and who share their biggest wins so that you can get inspired and grow your business. That's what you get on the Executive Wins Podcast. On today's episode, you'll learn how an Alberta startup is improving women's reproductive health, winning with Chairman Randy Duguay and CEO Sarah Harper from My Fertility Labs. I also want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Executive Wins Facilitation Services. If you need an objective, experienced facilitator to help with strategic planning, an innovative corporate retreat, or perhaps you need to bring together 100+ people to have a high-impact day that moves your goals forward. If so, then I suggest that you get in touch with me directly. In every engagement, I work before, during, and after to make sure that you have a successful meeting. My approach has been described as assertively kind, and I often say that because I'm not in the family, I'll be able to help everyone involved say what needs to be said. Here's a testimonial from Janice Baskin, manager for the Edmonton Regional Innovation Network, who hired me to facilitate a large stakeholder session. I had the pleasure of working with Gordon Shepherd, who facilitated a large-scale planning and networking day for the Edmonton Regional Innovation Network. Gord was incredibly organized, professional, and detailed throughout the entire process. His confidence and extensive experience were evident in how he handled everything from planning to delivery. On the day of the event, he expertly engaged stakeholders from multiple organizations in strategic sessions and skillfully led a panel of entrepreneurs. His diplomatic approach, combined with his talent for drawing out valuable insights from a crowd, made the entire process seamless. I was thoroughly impressed with his work. His leadership was key in the success of our event, and I would highly recommend his services. With 25+ years of experience, along with insights from facilitating sessions for dozens of clients across sectors, along with formal training through my MBA and ProSci Change Management certification. I am a facilitator who can help you to get the most out of your event while ensuring that it moves your strategic goals forward. So, if you are a leader who really needs to hire a confident facilitator to help you get solid results, then you can get in touch with me directly at gord@executivewins.com or visit the executivewins.com website for more information. And now on to today's show. We are lucky to be joined by CEO Sarah Harper and Chairman Randy Duguay from My Fertility Labs, an Alberta startup that is providing comprehensive fertility testing, expert care, and personalized support to help uncover the root causes impacting women's reproductive health. You can learn about their work at myfertilitylabs.com. That's myfertilitylabs.com. On this episode, you'll hear how Sarah became the founder and CEO of My Fertility Labs, and how Randy, an investor who is also her father, helped to mentor her along the way. You'll learn how Sarah used her lived experience to tell a powerful story that attracted investment and medical experts, along with helping her to build a team that is fully aligned around a core vision and mission. You'll also hear the investor mentor perspective from Randy, who talks plainly about what it takes to solve a problem and to actually get traction in a market. He even passes along a quote from Jimmy Pattison, who said this about entrepreneurs: "You can't take the elevator to success. You've got to take the stairs." This episode is a guidebook for startup entrepreneurs and the people who support them to be successful. I also want to remind you that this interview follows a specific format that I created called the Executive Wins Framework to help you learn the strategy, work plan, people, operations, and results behind every business win that you hear on this show. I really do hope you can use this approach to reach your next business milestone. And now here's Sarah Harper and Randy Duguay with their executive win. Sarah and Randy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having us.
Nice to be here.
Well, we are so lucky to have you here because there are so many leaders that are listening to this podcast that love learning from people like yourselves that start things up, make things happen, create legacy-driven scenarios. I know from speaking with Randy, he's sort of a giver back to the community on top of everything that he does. So it's not just about building businesses and making them successful. It actually is about kind of giving back as well. So we've got sort of a mix of genius, multi-generations here, and all those things that go into, making wonderful things happen. And I'm just going to get started because I know a lot of people sort of don't know you, but I'll jump in. I'm going to start with you, Sarah. If you could just say maybe who you are and let us know a little bit about yourself, if you had to introduce yourself.
Sure. So my name is Sarah Harper, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of the company My Fertility Labs. I actually have over 8 years of startup experience. So out of university, I've pretty much only ever worked for startups. And along the way, I went through my own fertility struggles. And so that has led me to build the company My Fertility Labs. So that's a bit of background for myself.
What a remarkable thing. And what can you share about that? When you touch on that and you say, I had my own struggles, what can you share about that that then motivated you in the direction that you're in now?
Sure. So I was working for actually another startup that, Randy was CEO of at the time, but I was going through my own fertility struggles. I experienced my first miscarriage, and then a couple months later, I was pregnant again. I was so excited, and I went to my doctor. And when they got the lab results, they actually said that I was going to experience my second miscarriage in a row. And I think what struck me about that conversation was they were so sure it was going to happen. And I asked, isn't there anything that can be done? And they said no. And so it really didn't sit well with me. I went home and I really just tried to call around to find any doctor that was able to help me to try to work to balance my hormones. I thought maybe there was something that could be done. And finally, the fourth doctor agreed to work with me. They immediately, increased my dose of thyroid medication. And thanks to that care, I now have a 2-year-old daughter today.
What a great sort of peak and valley story. I can't imagine how devastating it is, as a young mom, wannabe mom in a sense, to get into that moment to hear the wrong answer and then get proactive to find the right answer and actually get a result. Now you've got a 2-year-old, just for fun. What's the name of your daughter or son?
So my daughter's Gwen. I'm actually a mom of 3. So
Oh, okay.
not the
Right.
typical
So there
scenario
we
for
go.
starting
So we've got
companies.
all sides to this story in your own lived experience. And
Yeah.
then I'm just going to put this in people's ears so they know, because we'll get Randy to introduce himself as well. But so that means, Randy, you are not only father to Sarah, but also grandpa 3 times. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, 4 times actually at this
Oh,
point, but with my son has a daughter too, and his wife. Yeah, it was just a fascinating story, and Sarah has actually been working with me since she was a teenager, and and I had no idea that Sarah was facing some of these issues when she brought the idea to me. She'd been working with my company HealthGauge at the time, doing a number of things, and she finished her university programs and then joined me after that. She was supported in part by National Research Council even for a time. And so when she brought the idea to me, I started looking to see if my supporters, my investors could also support this idea within HealthGauge. And unfortunately, they couldn't. And again, at this time, I had no idea that Sarah took it upon herself to really start to research this idea. And she brought it to me and said, this is like on Apple, the App Store, the second most searched and application idea. And this is going back 3 or 4 years now. So unfortunately, we didn't have the investment funds at the time to support Sarah's idea. And so I said, Sarah, you're going to have to take it on the outside. And so I always remember you said one time, Sarah, you felt like I'd given you permission to go and be an entrepreneur. And honestly, I was really pleased to say that you had it in you, because you certainly have the capabilities that we as leaders and investors, as I do too, look for. And it's very significant work to take on this challenge of addressing a problem gap that is being underserved. And so Sarah launched herself into doing that work with a really, really amazing and exciting problem to address. And I'm always fascinated, Gord. I don't know if you've talked about this solution either, but every time I talk to somebody about this company, My Fertility Labs, everybody has a story to share, whether directly or as somebody they know. So, the evidence is there for just an amazing solution. And of course, Sarah has this incredible background also in digital health solutions and biology and marketing and psychology. So
well,
just a really
an
good person.
incredible
Yeah.
resilience and tenacity. Like, it
Mhm.
was so fun to hear somebody go through their education, go, well, I've only ever worked in startups. That's an unusual approach to things,
Yeah.
right? There's something where you got some, you maybe picked up something off of Randy there in terms of getting forward, but there's something, I mean, startups are not straight lines, right?
No.
These are ups and downs. So there's something about your tenacity and resilience through your own lived experience, plus throwing being mom in there somewhere. I mean, that's what a great sort of moment in time to kind of get to this point. Randy, I just need to get a feel for your resume. I know
Sure.
you had a deep history there, but just I don't need maybe the full thing right
Yeah.
now, but I
Sure.
need some
Sure.
highlights there to say what level of hitter that we're kind of dealing with, so that the audience knows who you are. Go ahead.
Well, so I've been in Edmonton my whole life. I'm born and raised here. And just a really short history. I did an electrical engineering, electronic engineering in the 80s. I did a master's degree in the 90s with operations research and quality management and those things. But I was at TELUS for 25 years in just an exciting period of time to be a part of TELUS. I worked on smart communities initiatives in Western Canada. And then I was a part of what is today TELUS Health Solutions from 2002 to 2012. And I've been an entrepreneur ever since as a founder, a CEO, bootstrapping and investing since 2012, and been a part of at least five, if not six, different companies, both public companies as well as privately held. And I'm continuing with that. So that's a bit about myself.
Yeah, and it's funny when I meet folks like you, I don't know that you're ever not going to be doing. I don't hear the golf clubs coming out 5 days a week for you in terms of what you're doing. There's simply this drive, this urge to solve problems, make things better, keep it in the family, keep those sort of capacity building things along there. So how lucky to have both of you here today, and we could have a 5-hour podcast about all the different things that you folks have done. But I need to jump in and just say, maybe I'll start with Sarah and say, if you had to describe your biggest win through My Fertility Labs. What would that win be, and how would you describe it?
I think the biggest win is that we've launched a platform. We're live today, and now patients who would otherwise be missed by the system can actually go in for a fertility screening. They can get fertility care, and they don't need to wait 12 months or longer, because that's the wait for a lot of fertility clinics across Canada. So, I mean, 2 years ago, if you look at the state of where things were at, I was looking to simply order lab work for my own fertility questions. I wanted to see where my hormones were at, to see following the miscarriage what happened there. And what the doctors that I went to couldn't provide was a regular fertility screen at my GP. So I looked online. I thought, where can I order a simple blood test? And so that led me to a company out of the US, and they wouldn't even be able to run my lab results. And so from there, I did more digging, and I thought, you know what? What if I get these lab results and I see that my hormones aren't optimized? Can I even go to anyone to get the care? And the answer at the time was no. And so at the time, working for a startup and knowing a lot of key people like Randy, a lot of, people in the tech space, building digital health companies, I know a lot of these really wonderful people. And I knew that, I would have the team behind me to help bring fertility care um, to Canada, so that it would finally be accessible, finally be affordable, so that people didn't need to pay $10,000 out of pocket. So we've launched, and I think that's our biggest win today.
You've launched, and isn't that
Yeah.
interesting to describe that sort of pool that you were coming up in, like those right conditions? If I'm going back to my Bill Gates remembering in those early days, there was a computer at the school where he was, so he was able to sort of go. But you were amongst this cohort in a sense of people that were like-minded, so that problem solving is not. There's no barriers. It's like, oh, I heard a no, but the no is not a big deal for you because you're going to go back into this these folks and actually be able to get some things done in there. So I'm just going to narrow this down for the audience and say, if we had to go one sentence or two sentences for the win, just give me a shot and try and summarize that.
So in order to get the win, first of all, you have to put on an a startup hat, which means that you're not going to have all the tools in the toolbox to accomplish what you need. So you need to look at the team you have, and you need to use those limited resources in the most effective way possible. So that means sometimes you need to learn new skills in order to get to that next step. And it also means that you need to see leaders in your team, give them problems that you're not sure of the answer, and trust them as well. Lean on them, because the best answers come from not just yourself but from your whole team. So you have to really be listening to those key people who are part of that startup team.
What a wonderful description. And again, you can hear you sound like a 60-year-old in there, and you're not. You know what I mean? You've been around this startup space long enough that
Yeah.
you're describing these things very, very thoroughly. So that's great. So I'm just going to drill in here and just say the win is, just for Sarah to say the win is, and then we'll know exactly what it is. Go ahead.
So the win is launching a company from the ground up over 2 years.
Yeah, and it's up and running and it's happening now. That's great. So when we jump into, so now we know what the win is, and we have all this wonderful background, and we can jump into what I call the anatomy of a win to explore this conversation. When we look at the strategy, the work plan, the people, operations, and results. So I'm going to go to Randy for just a second here. Strategically, you've got sort of a startup founder in a sense. If we separate out, I know there's all the connection there, but there's sort of when that gets in front of your investor eyes, your startup founder eyes, and we think about strategy, vision, mission, values, goals. What's a strategic highlight do you think maybe you were contributing to, or that you think is something to point out when we think about this win?
When I look at this win, I'm working with a lot more companies and teams and looking at so many ideas, and and as everyone here would know, creating a startup, addressing a problem gap is a really consuming exercise. It's like raising a child. And and I recently looked at participating in a startup TNT, over 60 companies from across Canada. Just a pleasure for us to attract that amount of interest in Edmonton. Amazing people and companies from across Canada, and they all compete, and it's just wonderful looking at these things, because you have to look at everything. And so when in supporting Sarah, I do a few different things, but there's no question that Sarah is the CEO and leader, and becoming a CEO is can become a life exercise. And so for younger people, and so Sarah's a millennial. Virtually everybody on Sarah's team is a millennial, and so this to me is part of my life's work right now. Is firstly trying to find those folks, those people that have the capacity and the qualities and the character to be the CEO. But fundamentally, being the CEO is as part of the thing that a startup needs. You actually generally need to have a number of people that are surrounding you, coming around you, grasping the problems and the ideas and so on.
Yeah, and
So
I'm just gonna
yeah,
jump in there and say I can hear in your overall strategy, we have an
mm,
umbrella strategy to support
yeah,
the entire ecosystem to a sense, and you've dedicated yourself not only with Sarah's company but also with many other companies. And your strategy and capacity building, in a sense, the highlight there is to actually find those leaders, groom them, sort of or help them to sort of grow up
mhm,
in terms of what they're doing. And I'm just going
mhm,
to switch to Sarah for a second
yeah,
and say then, okay, great. In terms of we heard the inspiration. You have a lived experience. You got a no. You didn't like the no, so you went back to your gang and you got things going. You then evolved and started up this company without sort of that regular investor pool that maybe you'd had access
yeah,
to, but you had to actually kind of get that going. Strategic highlights then in this win for you. You had a vision. You had a mission, in a sense. We hear that clearly. Not even if they're written down, doesn't matter. Like that was there. Any other strategic highlights in getting this app up and running to get this win? What do you think?
I think the biggest change that we experienced in getting things started, first of all, you do need some level of funding to get started. And so we did get some grant input that helped us get to the point that we are today. But what allowed us to get to that point was actually sharing my story. And I found that when you have a story that touches someone's heart, then it allows them to dig deeper, and then they're more willing to actually look at the problem that's going on, and it allows them um to be in the shoes of the person experiencing the problem. So I would say that don't be afraid to lead with your story, because that's what is going to reach both the people providing the grant funding, but also your team members. And that's all of our team members are also motivated by the same mission to make fertility care accessible and affordable. Um, but I think that some of the other key things involve building trust with your team. I think when you have a team that you can trust, you can, have timelines, and also you can ask what their perspective is on different things. And those are some of the things that really helped us get to where we are today.
Wonderful. And congratulations. Again, this is not, it sounds so easy. Oh, yeah, 2 years went by and we're up and running, right? We know the day to day and in terms of what that takes and all the different moments that you go through with what you're doing. But I did hear strategically share your story. Don't be afraid to make sure you connect emotionally, because we can hear that investors or people that support entrepreneurs are going to really dig into that, along with, I'm sure, the many stories that you could share from the people that are already benefiting from your app along the way. So share your story as a strategy, pretty important. And again, we could break down the full strategy thing, but I don't mean to sort of get into all of it. That's a great highlight to share. Anytime we have a strategy, we need a work plan. That's the second step in the anatomy of a win. So there's a timeline here. There's sort of a moment where it's an idea, and then we're up to now. Is it 24 months since idea to up and running? Is it what's the timeline in there, and what are some of the highlights along the way in the timeline?
So I would say that it's been 24 months since the significant, grant funding that allowed us to accomplish a lot of the main goals. But over that time period, one of the first things we did was we built our care team up. And we found we built out our tech team, but the care team was really integral for actually building the technology. And it's really important earlier on to talk to the people that will be using your solution, if it's a technology platform, and talk to all types of end users. We didn't just talk to the patients, we also talked to the clinicians, the fertility coaches, the nutritionists, because it's really important because actually each one of those care providers uses the technology in a very different way. So the first step was building the team. And then, we had to build out what the application was going to look like. Because before the developers go and code everything, there's a step where, it starts off almost like a drawing paper, and then it goes to the designers in Figma. But basically, you have to design the app, oftentimes just on a piece of paper to see what are the core features. And then from there, you have to put in, the timeline to say when the app needs to get started in order to get patients by a certain date. So, the first year was largely application development, but working with the clinician and the care provider team. And
That's
also,
yeah, that's I love it. And what we're hearing in there is a million phone calls somewhere in there, right? Where you're actually on the phone, you're speaking to who are going to be the users. You're actually getting some responsible pencil things. I can't tell you how many app developers I've been contacted by where they're like, "Hey, we built it. What do you think? Is it cool?" I'm like, "Wait a second." They skip the paper exercise and they get themselves into a lot of lost hours because they haven't got that product market fit. But you can hear the discipline in what you're talking about as a startup, right? Those early conversations, which not all of them are going to be positive because you said, well, some of the care providers are doing this kind of in different ways. So there's some of the highlights from that thing along the way. Randy, is this sounding like typical? Is 2 years about right for getting something like this up and running from your own sort of experience perspective? Or do you think it should go faster, slower, and anything that you have comment-wise on sort of the timeline?
Well, I think it is actually pretty realistic. Of course, we'll see, companies moving at slightly different paces. And for this particular company, there's a services element, there's an application element, and there's actually a sensor solution. We're partnering with another company based here in Edmonton, with John Murphy and BioStream, to look at adding more data assets to the solution a bit as we go. So, for sure, but but there's also all this kind of pre-development of just starting to understand the problem. So it's not unusual to see more than 2 years, a good year prior to just understanding, is there a market? Is there a problem? Before you even get into, building the team. So yeah, that's pretty typical,
Pretty
Brian, for
typical.
sure.
And I don't hear, Sarah, it sounds like there's not a major pivot in here. Is that correct? Like you had the concept and you were working towards it, or was there did you take a right turn somewhere? Like how would you explain that?
I think we've always been pretty focused on making this care accessible. So the goal today is very similar from when we got started. But terms of pivot, there's definitely been some changes in team along the way, and I think that there were some learnings about what makes a good team. And I think it's really important to find people that have the shared vision. And if you have too many people trying to drive the ship, that can really it's not going to lead to that end goal. So it's important to have people behind you. And listening is important. Like it's not just one person's voice that's guiding things, but at the same time, if you have too many different directions, it's not going to work. So we've stayed course through what we've always envisioned, but along the way, we've found the people that are really behind that shared mission. And yeah.
That's super insightful. I can hear this, young CEO, midstream CEO in the making. Because if I hear listening, that's a mature thing to say, right? Because often with the tech, we get excited. Oh, I'm going to talk about the tech, talk about the tech. But you said team. And I've heard that from Trevor Click from Plant A Technologies, who I talked to on this podcast. What does it take in that team to have the resilience to go through those 2 years of ups and downs and whatever it takes to actually build out this sort of opportunity, which is just so interesting to hear. So I'm loving hearing that thing of it's not just the tech, it's the team, and then we can bolt on other tech, because the physical tech that you're talking about, Randy, is that opportunity to get more data in, and that's actually a physical piece that goes on to somebody, and then they're getting more data in. And we could explore that whole thing as well. Strategy work plan, that's so great, and we've heard a lot of good nuances in around that. There's always people involved. That's the third step, and Sarah, you've started to talk about that already. In terms of the key people, how would you describe the key people, Sarah, from your point of view, and their attitudes towards this process? So if I can summarize from what I've heard from you, you're like, I have a problem. I'm frustrated about it. I'm going to call around. I'm going to do something, but then I'm going to really do something about it because I'm going to put in 2 years. I'm going to build a company. How would you describe your own attitude through this arc? And maybe I'll get to Randy's as well. Go ahead.
Sure. So I think that as someone in a startup, you first of all have to have a lot of resilience. Things aren't always going to be smooth. There's going to be late nights. There's going to be setbacks, but it's really how are you going to push through that and find it within yourself to have the hope to keep going on. And similarly, those are the kinds of people that you should surround yourselves with the team. It involves a lot of creativity because oftentimes you aren't gonna the solution isn't gonna be straightforward when you might not have all of the funding to get all the way to the end vision of your final product. So you have to think creatively. How am I gonna develop it? As most efficient and cost efficient as possible with the tools that you have. Um, so resilience is a really big thing. I think that creative problem solvers is another big thing. I think that in your team, you need to find people that aren't afraid to tell you when they have a different solution. And also, as a leader, you need to be able to ask, could we be doing this in a better way? And I'll give it an example with the booking system and we've developed a great booking system that's going that we're updating here in the coming weeks. But our booking system wasn't always straightforward. And the problem actually came from me not asking enough questions about what would be easiest to implement from the dev team. So we thought about the most amazing booking system for patients, but it would actually be incredibly complicated to implement. And so I put it on one of our wonderful front end developers who's done an amazing job for us. And I said, can you envision a different booking system that simplifies the process so that the coding is going to be more straightforward and that we can implement this a lot sooner on a smaller budget? And you know what? She really was able to deliver. She really impressed me. That and so now we've come a long way in our booking system, but it was such a simple thing just to ask someone else to come up with what their vision of it was.
That's masterclass stuff. That's I'm going to park my ego for a second here, and I'm going to ask for some help, as opposed to going leading, right where we get into trouble and we go too far and we run out of resources, because you're balancing all these different. I can't imagine seeing you as a juggler, that you'd be like 30 balls in the air, whatever it is that it takes to do that along the way. That's wonderful. Randy, you've been in the trenches, sort of getting something up and running off its feet, this kind of thing. How would you describe in getting this win, maybe your attitude in relation to supporting Sarah through here? Like, did you think it was always a slam dunk, this is going to happen, or is it peaks and valleys? Like, how would you describe your own attitude through this journey?
Well, this is why it's been so fun for me to be, available for Sarah, all the way through the course. And so I've known so I know the story, for years now. And in my own way, a part of it. And one of the things that I learned, sadly, oftentimes is by making mistakes. And when you're making a good company, you might have a really good, juicy problem, probably the most important thing to have in starting something. But it's one thing to have a really good problem. It's a whole other thing to actually have a market that you can reach and that understands what you're doing. So the assembly of an entity that can scale, what investors are looking for. We're looking for certainly are looking for a good CEO, somebody that understands, how do you build a team and then how do you reach market? Everyone talks about product market fit. And so it's been just really it's fun for me watching Sarah actually excel beyond some of the things that I was doing earlier in my entrepreneur career, because finding product market fit, everybody talks about it. But with my fertility labs as an example, it's very easy to grasp the problem. It's also easy to communicate it. The story is strong. The likability of solving this problem is strong. But it doesn't mean you're not going to have problems. And so, this is just, for anybody that's interested in, the whole creation of startup and being an innovator, being an entrepreneur. The truth of the matter is you start at the beginning. And then you work through the problems. One of the most famous quotes I ever heard was when Jimmy Pattison was here in Edmonton. He got his award years ago, and he's probably 80 plus years old. And Jimmy's been around a long time, and I'll never forget the quote he said. He said, you know what, you can't take the elevator to success. You got to take the stairs. And these comments really stick with you. And certainly when you start to look at the journey that an entrepreneur and the collection of entrepreneurs must take together. And that's what I'm really enjoying watching Sarah as a leader and Sarah and the team. My other daughter, Laura, is also part of this team. And just how Sarah is guiding and they connect and they meet is phenomenal. And so I have a very high sense of this team really continuing to step forward as we go, because these are the things that actually set most companies apart.
So we can hear the investor perspective here of, hey, take the stairs. Isn't that
Mhm.
interesting, right? And Sarah, you're like, yeah, I'm taking the stairs. Like I can hear that you've absorbed that and you're actually getting that done with all the nuances that are in there. Well, this is now going to turn into an 8-hour podcast because we could break down all these things along the way. How great. We've got this win. You know what I mean? My Fertility Lab's up and running in a couple of years. We heard the backstory to it. We talked about the strategy, work plan, people, highlights, a few of them along the way to give us a flavor of kind of what's in there. And the next step for me is operationally, you have to get things done. So I heard there's developers involved. There's making phone calls in terms of things. I'm going to say there's probably regulatory inputs, all kinds of things that you need to get in place operationally. And I don't mean to describe them all, but what are some of the highlights operationally, Sarah, to get this up and running from your perspective?
I think the first really important step, when you think about all of the different operational things we need to get done, is to just write it down as a plan. And so when we write down our operational plan, we actually break it out onto the tech side of things. How are we going to be developing the care team? How are we going to be onboarding people? How are we going to keep them happy? How is that going to look as we scale across Canada? We look at the regulatory. At what time should we be reaching out to Health Canada? It's important with regulatories to know that it's okay to reach out early just to get clarification on what is needed for you to meet all of the guidelines, and so that you can get that in place along the correct timeline. There's the keeping people happy and the HR side of things, and how are you going to be scaling the team over time, and what external um, people can you lean on? So universities can help with some really wonderful clinical trial type work. We have something planned for next year, to do a clinical trial to prove our success rates for conception. But that's something that really should be done with university partners because they're the best people to do clinical trials. And then there's the innovation side of things as well, because it's important when you're building a company not just to think about what's an effective solution today, but in the future there's going to be more competitors that crop up. So how are we going to be serving on that innovation front and to ensure that our long-term success as well.
Incredible. So make a plan, I'm hearing, before we jump into solving the regulatory issue only. Make a plan on the innovation scale. And by the way, anticipate the future in your plan. How wonderful. And that's neat to hear. There are whiteboards or something. There's some sort of interesting sort of things in your world that would be so fun to see the snapshots of. And how lucky that we're hearing a very detailed 360 approach to this. It's not like tech or people. It's the whole thing. So you've got that whole thinking going along the way. Operationally, Randy, as an investor, when you see these companies get built and you've been in the middle of them before, what's a pitfall that people hit into? Maybe that we can just in a few sentences give some wisdom about in the same way that you're telling us to climb the stairs.
Well, learning, yeah, experience is the catch point here. The one of the biggest things, for CEOs have to pay attention to, cliche perhaps, but don't run out of money, because it's going to happen. But most importantly, leading into that is the best way to not run out of money is to stay focused. Early stage companies, and even when you get into larger, even corporate entities, and I worked in a large corporate entity, I had amazing roles there too. And it doesn't matter what size of company you are, staying focused and achieving the base things that people need, that they are prepared to buy because they need it, and being very careful to know and recognize noise. We will hear people like Kevin O'Leary talk about noise to signal. I find it a little irritating, frankly, but noise is your enemy. And noise, it comes in so many forms for the CEO as you strive to serve your client. And I have worked in organizations and I have fixed things that I wish I never had to, because because we somebody, sometimes it isn't me, but it's not, but we lose focus, and so we start pursuing that next shiny thing and so on. So anyways, these are fundamental things. And so as we're working through the challenges that we must as a CEO, have we actually made sure, are we constantly checking that our team is doing the right things? And fundamentally, are we focusing on the client enough? And it's so easy to talk about these things, but in the startup world, you don't often have a client until like a year later. So we have to just continue to reinforce to the team the idea and the necessity of cutting out all the things that you should not be doing, and make sure you're driving on the client as soon as possible with your minimum
Shiny
viable
objects.
product.
It comes up all the time, right? There's all kinds of cool things because you're inventors, you're creative. We could do some neat things. We've got talented people assembled in a room, but how do we guide those resources in a sense operationally to get that? Well, how lucky to have this combo interview where we've got the boots on the ground and then this observer as well in terms of getting things pulled together. Finally, so I said strategy, work plan, people, operations, and then finally results. Qualitative and quantitative results. Quantitatively, I've heard 2 years later, we have an app. It's up and running, and you're going through. It's actually there. Can you speak, Sarah, to the maybe the hard data that you like to point out to the world, and then we can get into the qualitative as well? Any sort of stats you'd like to sort of bring forward about what's happening?
Sure. I would love to share some feedback that we received from the beta testers because we really couldn't imagine how positive it would be over the course of like two to 3 months. Really is how long we had the beta testers with us for their fertility screen and care. But we actually had our first pregnancy from the beta testers. From someone who was trying for years, so that alone, is worth absolutely celebrating. We've also heard that our care was life changing, which isn't something that we expected from, a 3 months fertility screen, but they were able to get answers about their health in a way that they had felt shrugged off from their family doctors in the past, or like they had all of these questions about what was going on. So we actually got to the root of what was going on for them. Another patient said that they were able to reduce their prescriptions by such a large amount that they felt good about actually paying for our services because of the difference in their prescriptions alone. So these are some of the things that we knew that the results were going to probably be positive, but we didn't know actually how game changing it would be for the patients that are coming through.
That is real world feedback. I mean, that's interesting. Congratulations. And again, how nice that you've also been in that moment before, struggling for self agency through healthcare, which we all need to have to a certain degree. But this is really an area where people have to push forward. And then you're getting those results in, funny enough, a relatively short period of time, the 2 years thing. And that's so good. So that's quantitative. Randy, any quantitative things that you like to point out in this case?
Well,
Observations?
one of the things I want to say, really, really important for my fertility labs, hard to do actually, is to bring healthcare resources, and a diversity of resources together in and across Alberta. So Sarah has also been able to attract and to work with a number of very specialized healthcare resources, pharmacists, the fertility coach resources, the doulas, the nurse practitioners, and other people, and then the consulting resources. Amazing people from in Toronto, with Dr. Sharma, a reproductive endocrinologist, and Dr. Anita Cote, a research chair based out in Vancouver. and then other resources here. So this company has built not just an application, but an outline on how to do collaborative care, which is complementary and respectful of health practitioners in the broad stroke.
How
This
wonderful.
is
That's
all
so there's that
incredible
element
things
of
to
the
do.
process itself of putting this all together could actually be replicated. I'm reaching back to your telehealth
That's
days
right.
now,
Well, that's
Randy. I'm
exactly
hearing
it.
there's a through
Yeah.
line right here that for what that is. Now we build on that. Sarah's in this area where we hear dozens of key people that were back on the quantitative results. So we've got dozens of key people coming together across the country to help to solve the problem. And that's also been gathered. We've got results happening for real individuals. That's pretty remarkable as well. And that's some quantitative highlights that we have. Qualitatively, Sarah, how does it feel? What's it feel like to go through this process?
Um, I think it's really sorry. It feels incredible to be part of a startup journey. For anyone that's interested in doing it, I really encourage you. That it's such a life changing experience. I think that you really have to prove your grit and over time that you rise to meet the challenges. So you'd be surprised at what you're capable of, and the skills that you learn along the way. I think that it feels really wonderful to start from this idea and to actually bring it to market to make fertility care accessible. Finally, the next step is to get some coverage from the government, because I don't know if you know this, but in Alberta, we're actually the only province that doesn't have some level of fertility care services covered. And so in some ways, fertility care is very much seen as almost completely separate from health, but it actually a lot of the things that go on with infertility and subfertility are actually pointing to something that's untreated or undertreated that's going on in the body. So everything that we provide is root cause care. And so I think that there's a real interest in the future to get this care covered. And so that's a big next step for us.
That's incredible. Yeah, that's great. And Randy, I mean, gosh, grandpa in there,
Yeah.
entrepreneur,
Yeah.
channeling your whatever, all your life reason. How's it feel to see this My Fertility Labs up and running?
Well, it's amazing, and I get to play a part, which is even more fun for me because I know we talked briefly, Gord, but to me this is a lot of fun, and to be able to add and contribute where I can, and again respectfully, to bring something like this to life where it is life changing. You couldn't ask for anything, more fascinating and more energizing than to work with people like Sarah and Laura and Min Bao and Amir Punajab and all the folks that are building this company. And so the more, and I'm still learning. This is another thing just to take note of is, just keep adding, keep contributing. And so if we get this right, which feels very much like is the case, we are going to scale this across Canada. And I'm already working on making connections into the United States and beyond. We connected in with Lithuania/Swiss-based company, or just last week. We'll be talking with them, and yeah, it's just very enriching. So it's gonna be a really fun ride.
That's so good. From Alberta to the world. Isn't that lovely that we're here? I always, when I get great leaders on the show, I just always I'm looking for one or two sentences. The stair one I'm going to take away forever. So that's so good. Thanks for channeling your Pattison thing there. That's so good. But Sarah, if you had to sort of, if you had a leader in front of you and they were maybe at the beginning of their startup journey and you had just a few sentences to say to them, what would you say to them so that they can learn from you?
I would say that, first of all, do something that you're passionate about, because that's ultimately what's going to get you through when the startup world can be very difficult. When you're passionate about solving a problem, especially if it's impacted you personally, then you kind of know how big the impact can be to others. So really make sure that you're leading with something that's passionate. I would also say I've seen a lot of competing viewpoints on this, so I want to touch on it. I've seen CEOs like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk talking about working excessive hours and really long work weeks, and like 60-hour work weeks or longer, 100-hour work weeks, and I'd say that that works for some people. As a mother of three young children, that would never be the case for me. And I put in a lot of hours, I do, but what I would say is, don't be afraid to live your life in parallel to your business, and give them both, so much attention. And when you're focused on your business, really be focused in those hours. But when you're focused on your kids, also really be focused on them. Because when you're looking back at this time, do you really want to be saying, I spent wow, all my time was spent working? Or do you want to say, wow, I created this really amazing business, but I was also able to see my kids grow up. So I think give yourself some credit to do the two things in parallel. And there's studies out of Sweden, and that looked into different types of work weeks, and they actually found that working within even sometimes a 4-day work week, you can actually get higher efficiency and increased revenues. So Sweden's actually switched to a 4-day work week. That's not necessarily the way to go for startups, particularly. But what I'm saying is that you don't feel like you have to put 100 hours in a week. Standard full-time hours is more than enough to get a startup off the ground. And don't forget to, live your life, and in addition to build your company.
I could dig into that one. That's really wise words. And what you hear then is leaders will listen to this. Some of them, they're going to get the permission to have a regular work week, because they're just going to be getting off the shiny object thing and getting on to being efficient with their time. That's just fantastic advice. Randy, last word for you. If you had a leader in front of you and sort of hearing this conversation, any couple sentences you want to pass along?
Well, I like the finish there, Sarah. I've been looking at the philosophy of remote versus at the office and everything, and just in some ways learning from younger people. We have to be pulling together, and we have to care about people. Tech and innovation is a deeply people business, and we have all this commentary and growth around artificial intelligence. And I think that's the wrap, is if we ever lose sight of serving people and how we're serving people, there's no end of technology innovation that actually will not help us in the end. So I think that's the storyline, and why it's also really just, again, exciting company to be working with, because you know what? We're working for future generations. So let's do that.
Sarah, Randy, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Gord. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Gord.
Take the stairs, not the elevator. Stay focused and tell a powerful story. That is how Sarah Harper, Randy Duguay, and their team win every day. Thank you, Sarah and Randy, for your inspiring win. Now, if you enjoyed listening to this episode, then make sure to check out our upcoming episodes, which include how to build a distributed leadership model through self-care and defining your boundaries. Winning with Shani Gwynn, CEO of Pipiguan Petiguan. And if you are a leader who really wants to learn how the Executive Wins coaching session can help you to grow your confidence and inspire your team, then visit executivewins.com to learn how. You can also subscribe to the Executive Wins newsletter to stay up to date on the podcast, live events, education opportunities, and more. Visit executivewins.com/newsletter to sign up. And if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe, and share it with a fellow leader. And don't forget to check out our resources and links in the show notes. And keep listening to the Executive Wins podcast for more inspiring wins that will help you to grow yourself, your team, and your entire business. Thanks for listening to the Executive Wins podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe as we bring you more inspiring wins from outstanding leaders so you can grow your business.